I know you guys were in Metaphor,
Right.
if I pronounce it correctly.
Metaphor.
Uh,
Metaphor. Yeah.
Metaphor.
Yeah.
There was quite a change in the music. First, it's completely instrumental, and musically, I think it's much more tighter and more evolved, more complex. What's your views on being with a band that was supposedly called neo prog, which I don't quite agree with the name, and with Isobar? What was the big change for you guys?
Well, well, the major change was to tighten it up in a way and really focus on the instrumental side. By the way, here's Jim Anderson. Jim, this is Roberto,
Hi,
and
Jim.
Hi, Roberto.
so when Metaphor kind of just finished what it was going to do, it kind of came just to the end, a natural kind of end after 4 albums, and Mark and Jim and I kind of wanted to keep going, but sort of look at it from a different angle, and we always really loved John's vocals, but we thought it might be better to go with an instrumental just to see what we could do, frankly. uh,
Yeah.
and and it enabled us to really sort of expand and explore instrumental stuff in a much bigger way than we did with Metaphor, and I think that's the result that we got.
Yeah, and
Great.
didn't have to worry about leaving vocals and think what's going to be a verse, what's going to be a chorus. I
Right.
mean, we still think in those terms, but it's not about like leaving room for a vocal line or having to write a vocal melody or worry about, a chorus. So it's all instrumental. So we still talk in those terms in terms of groove and rhythm and hook and, all those kind of vague musical terms, but it's just, there's no other words. So that's what we do. It's just instrumental. And
Yeah.
so it does leave room for some explorations that we might not have been able to do before or had to maybe do a fraction of what maybe we wanted to leave room for a singer.
I was reading that you guys were started as a band doing like cover bands from Genesis music. Is that true, or it's just
Yeah,
it
yeah. Mark,
is?
Mark and
Yeah,
I started.
yeah.
That was the first iteration of Metaphor, and we were just talking
Okay.
about it today. It's been like 30 years, which is crazy. But we had 2 or 3 hours of just the early Genesis stuff, and we had a couple of performances. But the goal, even then, was always to do original music, and after we sort of got the Genesis thing out of our system in a way, or most of it, then we came up with the original material and just took it from there and kind of never looked back.
Okay. Um, so what about the involvement of Matthias in the music that you guys are doing? Is he just a drummer, or is he kind of helping you guys produce the album? What's the involvement of Matthias in the band?
But he's primarily, I mean, he's a drummer, percussionist. He throws a couple of little weird sound effecty keyboards in there, and but he doesn't really participate in the compositions that the three of us do. He does not produce it. We're self-produced. Matthias, uh, back when I did I don't know if you know, I have a solo album that came out about 10 years ago called We Were, and it's instrumental, mostly instrumental. But at that time, uh-oh, Roberto, you're fritzing
You're
out again.
flickering again. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you
it's
go.
kind
There
of
you
weird.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
go. Yeah. So I just want to say that back then, when I was looking to do my solo album, which included
Yep.
Mark, well, I had seen Matthias's name around. I heard all the great music he did, and I started seeing him on so many different bands. And as a producer and drummer, I just emailed him and said, "Hey, what's going on? Here's some stuff. What do you think? You want to be involved?" And he thankfully said yes, and so he played on that. And then when we started Isobar, we thought that's the perfect drummer for this because he's so creative, and we kind of give him broad brushstroke guidelines for the drums in terms of play here and don't play here, for example, and that's about it. And then he just takes it, so his personality is all over this thing.
Okay, so you guys weren't in the same room just sending music that you liked, or you guys were all part in the studio together?
Yeah, it's via email with him. So we sent MP3s, or I don't know what you send to him, but
Yeah.
we send him the raw tracks once we kind of decided on a structure, and then send and say, here's the 7 songs, 9 songs, whatever it is. And we he went, it's like, when are you going to be in the Western Hemisphere so we can record? So he's come for the first album and the third album. He's come, stayed here at my house, and then we recorded over a long weekend. So
Nice.
we do it in the course of basically 2 days, like 2 half days and a full Saturday, and we get the whole album done. So he's really prepared. He brings his own notes. He's really good about it, and
Wow.
we knock it out and then send him on his way.
So
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 he's
at that
yeah.
at that point, we've got a lot of our parts already recorded, which we do at our home studios together and apart. And then, so when he comes in, we've got a good, it's pretty well done. And so he can listen to that while he's playing. Of course, he's been listening to it and learning it as he prepares for it.
Yeah, he's especially a very good drummer, very intuitive and very complex, eh?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something to watch him.
He always surprises us with stuff that we never would have thought of.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We're standing there in the control room of the studio. And I mean, just sometimes we all just go unbelievable. And he goes, no, I want to try it again. And we're like, that sounded really good. No, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it gets
yeah,
better.
And then he'll do a better take of it somehow.
yeah. And then he'll take off his shirt and then do another.
What?
Was his Swedish part, because they tend to think differently than us North American. Was it in terms of music kind of different between you guys and him?
I don't think
It,
so.
No, yeah,
no?
surprisingly not. We're really on the same page. He really understands our crazy music, and you know, brings so much to it, and we're really lucky to
Yeah.
have
So
somebody
Mark,
with
you would
that
consider your music crazy?
well,
I mean,
for
that's
lack
one
of a
way.
better term,
I mean, it's hard to describe, and
complex.
you've heard it, but it's quirky, and we try to write stuff that satisfies our need for sort of craziness and quirkiness and weirdness. And if other people like it, that's great, and people seem to. And so crazy is a strong word, but that's it's
Yeah,
unusual, in many ways.
I know
yeah.
that
Well, maybe
I know that the people are, let's say, our fans at Profil Prog really like complex music. We've done kinds of research and asked so many people what they do like, and they always come up with those weird bands, and they want to know everything what's going on in through the world. And I think Isobar tells them that it's that kind of music that they really like. So every time you guys get an album here in Quebec, it's very well received because it's a type of music. You got to remember that in the 70s, bands like Van der Graaf or Genesis were very popular in Italy or in Quebec, and not as much in their own country. So complex music in Quebec is something that people really like. If we're talking about complex music from the 70s, we would think of a band like Gentle Giant.
Yeah, yeah.
right.
And I guess you guys have those bands that you have been at a younger age influenced by. So if I would ask all of you three, which are the number one band that you really liked at that time, what would it be?
Go ahead, Jim.
At that time, like the 70s, you mean?
70s music, yeah.
Oh boy. My musical tastes have changed quite a bit over the years. In the 70s, we didn't have the same kind of quirky music that we have, in the West Coast in California. But I remember there was a college, I lived in a college town, and there was a college radio station. And I remember one day the DJ came on and he said, we've been playing this song, Reeling in the Years by Steely Dan before it got popular. And now it's popular. And I'm wondering, should we keep playing it? And I was about 14 at the time, but I remember calling in and saying, yeah, you should still play it. It's a great song.
Just because it's
What
popular
about
doesn't
you,
mean
Mark?
it's bad. Mark,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
what about you, Mark?
Oh, well, yeah. Elton John was the first person I had posters of on my wall, for sure, like in the early 70s. But then, Led Zeppelin was huge for me, and smattering of Jethro Tull and Pink Floyd. But then when I got in my first band when I was 14, these guys introduced me to all this new music, and it was King Crimson and Yes and Genesis. And then also Gentle Giant snuck in there pretty quickly. Kayak, I loved the mid-period Kayak, early now. Um, and and then the one that for me jumped out and landed just for me so strong in the later 70s was Happy the Man.
Yeah.
And Camel too was another one that was huge for all of us in my friends in high school.
Yeah, Happy the Man. I'm happy that you mentioned the name because unfortunately, Frank Wyatt just passed away
Yeah.
2 days ago.
Just
And
I
such a
just saw
great
that.
band.
Just heard
Very
that.
sad. Yeah.
Very sad. But listening to your music, there's kind of snippets of Happy the Man that we can hear, or I can hear through your music, even though it's totally different and very, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say
That's
more complex, but we could say that there's an influence right there in your music, especially in your keyboards.
well, that's any mention of Happy the Man in the same, breath, same paragraph as us is a tremendous compliment. And about keyboards, Kid Watkins is one of the greats, I think, one of the unheralded
Just
great,
amazing.
top three mini mode players of all time. He's so good
I so
and great
agree.
composer.
What about you, Malcolm?
Back then, interestingly, as a young kid, it was nothing but the Beatles. And I went right from the Beatles to progressive rock. The first time I heard Close to the Edge at age, I don't know, 13, 14, that was it. And I never went into any of the other rock stuff. It was all there in the background of my youth, but it was right to, yes, Genesis, Gentle Giant, Camel. Those are probably the top four. You asked for one. None of us gave you one, but
Okay.
but those are the top four, and that, and in our very first Metaphor album, had a lot of people, a lot of critics compared it to Genesis as far as the influence, and it was almost like we had to get Genesis out of our systems, and all this music had built up, and it's all based on sort of the Genesis stuff. So we kind of did that, and then evolved from there. But those are the ones that really stuck with me, and I like Happy the Man. I don't know if I'd call it an influence in my composing, just because I didn't get into them that much. I didn't really know about them until years later. So there's a few there, and they're all good.
But you're a guitar player, so since they didn't have, they were more of a keyboard band. In terms of your guitar playing, which is very unusual in terms of the sound that you get, it's we're talking here about prog music because most of our listeners do say that it's prog music. Myself, I just consider music which is good or not. But the way you play guitar is kind of different. What was your main influence from any guitar players that you would mention?
Well, it's kind of the guitar players from those same four bands. I mean, Steve Howe, Steve Hackett. By the way, the Dixie Dregs are another big one for me from way back, and that maybe is even a bigger influence in some ways in terms of the composition. Not that we do stuff that's approaching that level of proficiency by a long shot, but Steve Morse, Steve Howe, all the Steve Hackett, Gary Green, Gentle Giant, and Andy Latimer. I mean, those are kind of the ones I kind of learned guitar playing them, and I think there's a little bit of those guys in there in terms of the mentality of how I write stuff and how I played on guitar.
Okay, so let's leave the past behind and talk about your album, your new album. Um, very first thing I wanted to mention, who composes the main body of all the songs that you do as a band? Are you guys three of you guys part of composing the songs, or it's one of you guys that's the main
Yeah,
composer?
it's it's Malcolm mainly, and he brings in all the raw material. He creates it on the computer in that room that he's sitting in right now.
Okay.
And we go over there and um as a team, we go, oh, that's yeah. The three of us and red wine is the fourth member, or maybe fifth member after Matthias of the band, because we go over there, have a little glass of wine or two, and go, hey, maybe that should be this and this should be that, and maybe try a D instead of a C. So we go over there, drink some wine, get into the computer files and listen to everything and say, hey, that's, we just kind of knock it
Arrange it.
all out and say, let's do one more of that bit and maybe cut this part out, switch this to the beginning or whatever it is. And we just slowly go through each song, and then we get to each song about halfway done. Then we start the beginning again. We get each song about 75% done. And then we go through it again and just refine it down, and then decide, okay, that's done. Then we'll start recording.
Okay.
And he sends me a MIDI file, and I record bass and drums. These like basics, so I have like a rhythm section to play against, and then I start learning the songs. I print it out. I do it on notation software because I can read music, and so I want to get to know the chords and the chord changes and the melodies and stuff. So I print that out and get to know it by editing all that, and then once that's done, print out a whole score of the whole album, and then start recording. Just pick a song and start learning the parts and laying them down. And then
Awesome.
Malcolm and Jim also learn their parts separately, and we'll either record separately or together. We each have a way to record at home. I have a Pro Tools setup where we kind of everything lands here, and then we, schedule Matthias for, maybe from that point on, maybe 3-4 months down the line, whenever he might be over here again, and then we'll go for it.
And this last album, of course, has a guest violinist and also a couple of horn players. And so the horn players record their stuff at their studios and send us the files. And that's after we have the music, scored, so we can send them the scores. And then the violinist for this album came over to Mark's house, and we recorded her right there in his little studio.
Your use of the Mellotron and the B3 Hammond, what's the Mellotron use that you get? Is that a real Mellotron, or if it's a computerized Mellotron?
No, I have a digital Mellotron. If I could turn the computer, but I can't turn. But I have a keyboard rack over here and have my 7 keyboards that I use.
Okay.
But it's a digital Mellotron, and sometimes I use samples in my Kurzweil or the Nord or Roland. But generally, it's the digital Mellotron for the classic Tron sounds.
Oh, great. What about the Hammond that we can
The
hear?
Hammond, yeah, don't have room for a Hammond and a Leslie. So that's most of the organ is done on the Nord Electro. So it has drawbars, so you can, really dial in the exact sound, and then, add in the Leslie and whatever distortion. So you can really tweak in exactly what I want. But it's the organ, I would say 90% is Nord.
Okay.
It sounds great. So records very well.
What do you think, Mark, about the Mellotron? It's always been associated with prog music, but it's such a majestic sound that it's quite related to all the prog bands. But there's been many pop singers who still uses that sound in their songs, and people just don't know what it is. What's your input on that?
I think it's one of the greatest things ever. And Jim was a Mellotron guy, right? Jim, you had one, the white one, and you were in a club, weren't you? Some kind of Mellotron.
Well, there used to be an email group that
Oh, okay.
kind of disbanded because Yahoo got rid of the groups, but
Oh,
I still have it actually, but it's not working right now. So that's going to be a project coming up here to
What?
try to get it fixed.
Your Mellotron's not working?
Imagine that.
That's
Yeah.
unheard of.
when I go to the NAM show, you know what the NAM show
Yep.
is, Roberto?
Yep. Yeah, I know.
Down in Southern California, I've been going for 20 years. I always gravitate towards the Mellotron booth and hang out because people come by and he takes the backs off so you can see the tapes going up and down and playing how those keys just I'm used to like really good keyboards even with the great classic old sound, but the old keys just move kind of very spongy and it just but the people that not even keyboard players but people just come by and they're fascinated and then I'll whip
Absolutely.
out a King Crimson part or play um I Am the Walrus or something
Exactly.
on the Mellotron, crank it up, and people go, right on, man, cool. Um, it's really fun just to hang out at the Mellotron and go like, hey, can I get a T-shirt for playing that Crimson
Hoping to demo it.
or whatever?
Something like
There
that.
you go.
Oh,
Excellent.
there, yeah, nice.
Excellent.
Very good.
The Mellotron's great, and the Mellotron movie is really interesting too.
Yeah,
I have
I've
the
seen that.
DVD.
It's awesome, eh?
Yeah,
Well,
Okay.
seeing your T-shirt, we're gonna have to put more Mellotron on the next
yeah.
album.
It's not just playing or a choir. It's a Mellotron is its own thing. It's not you're not imitating an orchestra, even though that's its intent. But it has its own spirit and ambience.
Exactly.
It just says
If we go
Mellotron,
back
and you
to
have to use it.
Yeah, if we go back to the first Moody Blues album,
Oh yeah.
they
Sure.
had that string band, they had that orchestra with them, but they still use the Mellotron. So it makes sense. It's even though it doesn't sound classical, it's still an instrument that is very related still with prog music. And
Absolutely.
all the people that I talk to they like that sound. They just love
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah.
You have to use it. So maybe we'll use more on this next album that we're already working on. Number 4 is coming too.
Yeah, we're in the middle of number 4.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
already.
absolutely. In
Oh,
fact, when we're
great.
done tonight, we're going over to his house and
Awesome.
knock it out.
When we wrote number 3, well, the last big creative push for material, we really had enough for 2 albums at that time, and we had to say, okay, let's just do these for 3, and then we'll do the second half of this bunch of shit that we wrote for 4. So now we're on the second batch for number 4.
Oh, nice.
That's married to you and me.
Yeah, man.
So let's talk about the music industry, which is a bit more complicated. Many of my friends and people that I used to know that used to buy vinyls and CDs are more and more into streaming companies. What's your input on that going on? It's kind of scary on my part, but I'd like to know about musicians. What do they think about that?
What do you think, Jim?
Well, I'm kind of like you. I've always been kind of resisting it, but it's inevitable that it's coming, and there's nothing you can do to stop it because people just like the convenience of it. And I kind of understand that too, because I remember when iPod first came out, I was like, no, I don't want any of that. But then, I got one early on and started using it, and it just changed the way I listen to music because I could listen to it anywhere, and it's portable and didn't have to lug CDs around in my car or whatever. And streaming is the same, only it takes it just to the next level. So unfortunately, the model for reimbursing the artist is not very good.
Exactly.
You get just pennies per hundreds of plays,
If
really.
that, yeah.
That's the biggest problem. Right?
But like I said, you can't really stop it. So, we try to find a happy medium, and we still publish our music there just because we just want people to hear the music. But
Exactly.
hopefully they're the kind of people that will want to reward the artist and support the artist so that we can produce more. And
Yeah.
that's how I feel about, other music too. I stream some, but if I go see a live band and I like it and they have some swag there, I'll buy a CD, and if they don't, I'll download it and buy it, but still stream it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's
I-
your input, Mark or Malcolm?
Well, same as what Jim said. It's convenient. It's there. It's a way of hearing things you wouldn't normally hear. So I've had friends kind of get rid of all their stuff except for their very special collection stuff, but got rid of thousands of CDs and vinyl and just streams. And now he's completely into classical music. He's like, "Do you know this guy? Rachmaninoff." I'm like, "Yeah, everybody knows Rachmaninoff," or whatever it is. And he's really into it, where he wouldn't know that music otherwise if he was just, buying records like he used to. So there's an upside to it as a listener. But I do both, but I still tote CDs around in my car because I can't, if I want to hear IQ, I just want to grab that CD and listen to IQ or whatever. Like I have in my car right now. And I'll still buy the CD that I want to support the artists. So my collection is still growing, even though I'm thinning out in other ways.
Yeah.
Getting rid of stuff, but I want to buy those important artists and buy the new Myriador or the new, take your pick, Isobar.
I agree with what Mark and Jim said, and the actually, I'll share with you, Roberto, that our last Isobar 2, for the first time, as far as physical retail sales from the band, not including wholesale, because we sell a lot to distributors, but just from our own shop, we actually had more digital sales than physical sales for the first time last album. And so that I think is the direction. And interestingly, I'll just share with all you guys, there's a really cool show on Netflix that is about how Spotify began. And it is talking about these very issues and the battles. It's in Swedish with subtitles, and the battles they had with the record companies to figure out how the record companies are going to make money and the musicians are going to make money and still make it a free site, and come up with how to monetize that without pushing people away to piracy. And I highly recommend it. I'm in a few episodes. If it's on Netflix, it's called The Playlist. Interestingly enough, it's the same. That was 15 years ago, and we're still not anywhere near where we need to be in terms of compensating the artists. It's just insane where it is right now. So we're not too worried about trying to make money. We really just love the music. We love the process that we go through together as a team and a band to do this, and we love having that physical CD to show. It's just nice to be able to, grab it and go, yes, and so we'll keep doing that. But we'll see how it goes for this one and what the ratio is of sales, and maybe we'll adjust down the road a little bit.
Sure, let me know about it.
Yeah, I want to tell you guys, we have like 3 minutes left on this Zoom call. We could restart another call if you wanted to, or where do you want to go, Roberto?
I would have, let's say if we finish that, I would have more of a personal question. Love your music. A lot of guys that I know love your music. What about doing shows in Quebec? Are you guys planning something in Canada? Are you guys planning and doing shows in Canada?
It's unlikely. We are,
we're a studio monster.
Studio band.
Yeah, it's pretty much a recording project, and the music is complicated. It might take additional musicians on the stage to actually do it, and it would take a significant investment in rehearsal and other issues, and so it's unlikely. I'll put it that way.
Okay, so let's bump into the actual album, which I would like to talk. Second song, Parts of Harvey. I've probably listened to that song like 20 times in a row.
Let me say one thing about our song titles. They're often essentially stream of consciousness, and not a lot of, necessarily not a lot of real meaning. Usually when I start writing the stuff and I just have to save the file, and I just, whatever pops into my head. And in this case, it was Harvey. I'll call this chunk Harvey. And then when the band started working on it and looking at it, I think Mark suggested, how about parts of Harvey, which was even more odd. And so we said, okay.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. I always think of the old movie Harvey,
Yeah.
the Jimmy
Yeah,
Stewart
Bunny
movie.
Rabbit. Yeah.
So parts of Harvey.
Yeah. Which parts?
Yeah, certain scenes. But it just sounded funny. And the sound echo of parts and Harvey, that AR sound.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So no relation with so I guess your songs, the way you compose and everything, is more of musical complexity and not something that relates to something that you guys have lived.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're not trying to paint any specific picture or anything.
The only message is we think this is cool, quirky, weird, fun music. It scratches that itch for us. Have a listen. That's really the only message. We don't try.
That's the only.
That's it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of, for me, it's just the music, just, wherever it comes from, it comes. We try and document it. And, I will say that the title of the opening cut, the title does have if you saw that, it's Are You Now or Have You Ever Been? And maybe you know this, but it's from the 50s Red Scare in the United States, where, are you familiar with that at all, Roberto?
Yeah, well, the McCarthists?
Yeah, the McCarthy hearings,
exactly.
where the first question they would ask these people who they were harassing was, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And I just thought, and that's kind of where it came from, but I just thought that the term, without the communist part, are you now or have you ever been? I think that's just a weird question to ask, or two questions. So we try to, the titles are almost like just another little piece of the song, another quirky little unusual thing that's part of the song, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, yeah. I get it.
And we have a list, you have a list somewhere of like song title ideas.
That
could be that. That could go with that song that we thought of 5 years ago or whatever. And same thing with even the name of the band or any name of a band. It's so hard to name bands and name things that it's just something that makes you laugh or smile or just think it's cool.
Yeah.
Because we as listeners, how we are as listeners, we're always trying to find that explanation on one song or the meaning of that, the name of a band, Isobar. It reflects something, because if we look at your 3 albums, the covers relate to the name Isobar, I guess.
In a way, I mean, the first one obviously, and then the second one was I saw an article on the internet whenever it was when we were getting number 2 together. And I thought, oh, that's a great picture, and it was like isobars in space, and I thought it was a perfect companion piece to the first album. And we got permission from this astronomer team down in Australia, right, Jim?
Yeah.
And then we were able to use those images for the second cover. And then, I know what you're saying. Like, the fans want to know everything. Is there special meaning to that title but no, it's just funny turns of phrase or some
play on words or something.
Some funny sound or whatever.
Good to know. What about the cover of the third album? Is it something, was it an artist that did it, or?
Yes.
Who?
Mark did that.
Mark. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I was gonna mention this to you guys, since I have the paintings in a closet right here, and they're only just like a foot square. So I had this idea. I saw this image, and we couldn't get the artist to return our emails, and so I just did it myself.
Fantastic.
And I have all the images on the front and the back and the inside, and the CD itself are. Jim actually did a great job of finding the images to what goes on the CD and then what goes on the back and all that stuff. Did a great job, but very little in the end. tweaks from us.
Okay.
So it's based on these three paintings, and we should sell it to the highest bidder. Who's the biggest Isobar fan? You get the painting.
Awesome. Good idea.
Yeah, but I didn't want to like I didn't want to say like, we should have made up a name,
Yeah,
like, but
Spark
the
Mooner.
artist.
No, Spark Mooner.
Yeah, where, Roger Bean or something, um, but
Mr.
yeah, I didn't want
Mr.
to I didn't want to put a credit on the album that it was like, I also did the cut, and like raise my hand. So it's our
But he
little
did.
secret on this Zoom call.
Yeah, that no one really has asked that. You're the only one that we've talked to, and so you're the only one with that information.
That's a scoop.
That's
You've
a
got a
scoop.
scoop.
I got one at least. Okay, guys. So my three favorite songs. We always have those favorite songs, eh? Is "Are You Now," "Shadow Green," and "Full Nelson."
Hmm.
If I would ask you guys, what's your favorite on the album? What would you say?
Ooh,
Ooh.
that's tough. It's like picking your favorite child
Oh.
Yeah, it really is. And
or your
in fact,
favorite pet or something.
we finished recording this Isobar 3. We finished recording it last summer, midsummer, I think it was, right, guys? And haven't really, I mean, aside from going in the mixing process, we're frankly, my mind is so much on the new material. And there's an old adage that, when you ask a musician what their favorite song is of their collection, it's like the one that you just wrote, the most recent.
Yeah, it's the next one.
The next one, but with that said, I mean, I think that I would say that the opening cut for me, "Are You Now," kind of covers all the bases. Although I love "Fourth Leg" as well. Those two maybe are my two favorites. I love them all. My kids.
Yeah, it's like picking your favorite child. It's really hard.
Totally
For me,
agree.
I would say Harvey. I would say parts of Harvey and probably Mimus Polyglottis, Alarm Clock. But when I hear any of them, I'm like, God, that's really cool. Like I'll hear Fourth Leg, or I'll hear Trouble with Buttons, and go like, that. God, what a great cut. But my other ones, I would say those two are probably the top of the list, and then the next two would be Shadow Green and what's the other one? Oh gosh, the titles. It's like the music's in my head, but the titles.
Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, Face in the Blue and Shadow Green are in there too for me.
Original titles, blue and green.
Yeah, just
differentiate
from each other.
Those are the file names. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Jim?
For me, I think the Trouble with Buttons was one of the hardest to play.
As a bass player?
Yes, and sometimes the most challenging ones are, they're the most satisfying in a way when you finally are able to play it. But I think probably my favorite is Full Nelson, because that's the one that after the song stops, I keep hearing that melody going on in my head, and it just resonates with me somehow.
That's what question that I wanted to ask you, because it seems obvious when we hear keyboard players or guitar players, the complexity of what they're playing seems more easier for us as listeners to hear. But as a bassman, it's sometimes more difficult to get. And I see that you guys, when I hear your bass, Jim, I see a lot of very complex style of playing. What would you say what kind of bassman would you consider yourself going into your music?
What kind of a bassman?
I mean, you're a very complex bass player.
Well, to tell you the truth, Malcolm actually writes a lot of the bass lines, and Mark has a lot of input. And I come down and listen, and they'll say, "Can you play it?" And I'll say, "Yeah, I can play that." But I don't have my bass in my hand when I'm saying that. And then later when it's time to learn it and I pick up my bass and I start trying to play it, I realize, oh boy, I'm in
Oh my
trouble here.
God. What did I get into?
Yeah.
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 He
But
doesn't get off easy. Yeah.
in fact, I kind of remember calling Malcolm one day and I think it was The Trouble with Buttons. And I'm like, this song is insane. It's like random notes. I can't play this. And I just, I just break it down into, maybe 3 notes at a time. And like, can you play those 3 notes? I keep repeating it until I can do it. And then, okay, how about 5 notes? How about 6 notes? How about 2 bars? And then, just get comfortable with each section and then put them all together. And then finally I can play the whole song. But as soon as I record it on to the next one. So that's what Malcolm was talking about. If we were going to play it live, I'd have
Yeah.
to start from square one again.
Well, that's interesting because your music is so complex, very so neat. It's such an awesome sounding unit that you guys. It shows that you've been together for a long time. Uh, for my part, it's my type of music, so it's easy as a listener. Whenever I play it to friends of mine, they'll say, "Wow, these guys are awesome musicians," and it sounds like it. So it's congrats to you guys.
Thank you.
So
That's good to
my
hear.
very last question would be, where you're already talking about a fourth album coming pretty soon. Fourth.
It'll be late next year at best, and maybe a little later than that right now.
So what would you say, Malcolm, is going to be the big difference? Where are you guys going into in the future?
You know that's a tough question because we did write all the material, like I said, at kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There may be some differences with the four. I don't know. I kind of feel like it's a little more symphonic, progressive in a way. It still has all the kooky stuff and the fun stuff that we love, but there may be more of the symphonic thing. I'm just guessing. I mean, I'm so in the middle of it. It's hard to sort of take that wider view of it. What do you
Yeah.
guys think?
I think of it as it's maybe, I don't know, more symphonic, but just maybe a little more harder edged slightly than what Isobar 3 is.
Yeah, fair enough.
But we'll
Sounds
see.
good.
We haven't decided on sounds or anything, guitar sounds and keyboard sounds, just rough ideas. This is a piano, this is an electric piano, this is a mellotron. But beyond that, it's like, we'll see. And then Matthias, it's like,
Well, he adds
wow.
that other dimension, right? So I think the real answer is we're not really sure until we get it recorded and really hear, and then it gets mixed by the great Robert Barry, who he puts his imprint on it too. So it really comes out rather different than what the original sort of computer files were. Very different and
Yeah.
better, of course. It's real, So I mean, it's hard to say how it's going to change until we're at that later stage, in a way.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, Malcolm, that you're talking about Robert Barry. It kind of relates to Emerson, Lake, and Palmer.
Mhm.
And just a quick thing that I just learned last year. Paul Bialakowitz. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it.
Oh yeah,
correctly.
the guitar player, yeah.
Yes, he's in the LP tribute band
Yeah.
with Carl Palmer. Just noticed, I just learned that he married my cousin.
Really?
Wow.
So it's kind of weird.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Because I'm Portuguese. My family name is Cabral, like the port wine, and
Yeah.
I was so impressed to see that my cousin, which is this young Portuguese girl, married with a British guitar player. So funny, and it all comes back to this. But it's a small world. Music is a small world, and you guys have been awesome. It's very interesting talking to you guys. Hopefully we'll see you one day. Probably not in a show, as you explained, but let's say if we get together in New York or whatever that would be awesome, guys. And I would really say that it was very instructive for me, and I love your music. So notes are going to be very good on the Isobar 3, that's for sure. And I love your music, guys. So keep going on, and
Thank
there's a
you.
lot of fans behind you guys.
That's great. That's why we do it. People like
Yeah.
you that really like it. That's, you know, there's just one other person out there in the world that likes as much as we do. We're
Right.
doing it right.
Right.
Yeah, there's a
Hey.
lot in Quebec, I can say you that.
Oh, that's
That's
good to
awesome.
hear.
Good to know. Thank you.
Mark, Jim, Malcolm, it's been awesome. Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much,
much.
guys.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Great to meet you. We'll talk to you again. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank
All right.
you.
Take care.
Soon. Bye.